Hello and welcome to my video, all freedom loving friends. On this video I decided to talk about some numbers, and those numbers actually I'm going to refer back to another video that I posted on my channel, which I will be putting its link right below this video. It's going to be about the number of deaths in the United States annually and how we can interpret the numbers as far as ensuring the security overall, reducing the crime rate and increasing the safety and security of the citizens and its relationship, its correlation to gun ownership. So the perspective that I'll be using here, I'm not going to be sharing any numbers because like I said, I did have another posting which uses a ton of data, which in fact, I created another presentation out of based on that data, and did my presentation, and that's what the link is about. By the way, let me kind of describe the size of the data, the volume of the data that I found is over 500,000 records, which is incorporating all things related to crime rate, crime figures, crime data in relation to all the crimes committed with firearms. Including that data, there's also suicides. It's primarily between suicides, homicides, and accidental death. So that's why I said, I'm not gonna. I'm trying to do kind of a little more summarized fashion this presentation instead of delving into numbers. But my approach for things like this, I cannot help but bring my own professional perspective, which is from the data analyst perspective, because I do earn my living working in this area called data analysis, and on my day-to-day responsibilities, there's nothing but working with data and making sense out of that data. So first off, again, like I said, it's going to be kind of a summarized version of what I studied before. I hope I know you're going to be hearing a lot of things that you're aware of, you heard so far, but again, it's kind of maybe a little bit of a another perspective coming into issue and playing from the numbers perspective. The year 2022, the year 2021 was the deadliest year in America as far as number of people lost their lives with firearms. The number is a little more than 48,000 people. Now I'm going to stop here and use kind of take the other side. Okay, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of those who are for gun control. When they come to argument, they can easily come with numbers like this: 2021, close to 50,000 people were killed. They lost their lives because of firearms. And if we can't have a better control as far as the gun ownership goes, if we can reduce the number of guns, if we can reduce the people who has guns, or if we can make it more difficult to reach guns, to access guns, then we can help a lot. We can reduce the number of people losing their lives. Typically, the other side, I'm going to use these two terms, the other side, which is the gun control side and gun rights side. Obviously, I don't have to repeat that. I'm on the gun rights side. So, okay, nice. They're right. They're not lying. The number is that they are using is not wrong. 48,000 people lost their lives in the year 2021 because with crimes committed or maybe homicides with firearms. Now let's pay close attention to wars. Gun control side is talking about primarily the crime rate, right? We're talking about crime rate, and that's their pretty much the platform that they built their arguments upon, reducing the crime rate. First off, let's look at the portion of the homicides within this number. The amount of people who lost their lives out of total 48,000 in that year 2021 is about 55 to 60%. That's that's suicides. And you just kind of, if you look at the numbers roughly, let's say the number is, to make the calculations in my head easy, 50,000, half of it 25,000, another 10%, 5,000. So that makes basically about 30,000 people, which makes 60% of the 50,000 people who lost their lives. They died because of homicide. So now, by definition, we're looking at crime with firearms. Therefore, if we have to, first off, let's take the number away, homicides, take it out of this equation, so we can focus what we're talking about. So out of 50 minus 30,000, we have now 20,000 people who lost their lives with firearms directly related to crime-related incidents, robbery, whatever, arguments between two people, maybe domestic arguments, any kind of ill intent, the planned ill intent, whatever, crime. So now, out of that 20,000 people, which is still pretty high in one single year, 20,000 people lost their lives because of the criminal intent with firearms. If you look at the distribution of those murders, I'm going to call them murders because it's a crime, intended crime with firearms, it's a murder. And if you look at the geographical distribution within the United States, you can see those deaths are kind of clustering around certain areas of the United States. It is definitely not nicely and evenly spread around the entire 50 states in the Union. They are they're clustering in certain locations of the nation. Those are typically starting with Chicago, Illinois, New York City, New York, Denver, Florida, Los Angeles, San Francisco. You can look at, if you're ambitious, please challenge me. You can go ahead and research on those numbers, and you're going to find maybe a few other cities that I can remember now. Like I said, I'm not bringing any data, any statistics. I'm not looking at any tables. I am talking from my memory, based on my previous studies of those numbers. So you can add some cities. You're going to see that the highest percentage, highest ratio you're going to find in the state of California. What's following that is state of Texas. Now, if you look at the crime demographics of those areas, the crime statistics of those areas, those particular areas, and I just counted how many? About 4 or 5 cities, major cities in the United States. Their overall crime rate, their crime level is much higher than the national average. If you say, for instance, there are statistics and you can easily find, if you take a number 100 as a base, let's say 100% or 1 or 100 represents the average crime rate in the United States. That's the average. If you look at it, you're going to find lots of cities way below that average, like 50, 40, 60, 70, way below. But the ones that I just counted, I just mentioned, are way above that number, 100. And like I said, I just counted 5. You can add maybe a couple others. But again, those locations, those cities have significantly higher likelihood of a person falling a victim to crime. In fact, they also come up with those statistics. If a person living in those areas, in those major cities, major metro areas, what are the likelihoods of that person falling victim to a crime? And they give that also in 1 to 10 kind of ratio, or the measure, or metric. So if you analyze the crime structure of those places in compared to the entire average demographics of the nation, then you're going to come up with completely and entirely and utterly different picture. Number of gangs, number of people who are part of those gangs, the people who are constantly in and out of jail system, and constantly getting arrested for various types of crimes, robbery, murder, rape, what have you. You're seeing overall crime statistics are also clustering in those areas. What that creates is some kind of a profile, an individual who fits the criminal profile. Yes, this is reality, and yes, no, it's not necessarily some kind of a profiling in the sense that you people know we use, but it's actual based on data and statistics. There is something called an individual who is fitting the criminal profile. And the number of deaths, that 20,000 people, you remember I said it because I separated 30,000 homicides, the 20,000 people, overwhelming majority, I'm not saying 100% of them, but overwhelming majority of those people who were victims of violent crime committed with firearms are actually from those areas. In other words, if you take those areas out of the union, out of the 50-state union, and if you look at the rest of it, the picture is pretty peaceful. There is nothing really alarming. It is pretty peaceful. And one other aspect I also want to mention that, in this case, in this kind of analysis, those same areas. You remember I started with Chicago, and then I continued with New York City, and then San Francisco, and then Los Angeles. Those areas are the bastions of gun control. I repeat, those are the bastions of gun control. The toughest laws against gun ownership are practiced in those areas. It is ridiculously ironic that those very areas with the toughest gun controls in the nation are experiencing the highest rate of crime with firearms. Whereas the rest of the area, the rest of the nation, without that much tough laws against gun ownership, if you call it kind of a peacefulness, I'm going to use that term, or the ratio of the victims who fell, people who fell victim, to firearm related crimes is way less. The picture is, as you see, is incredibly interesting. So they can't do enough to prevent gun ownership. They keep coming with laws and restrictions, but their measures, their laws, have any measurable impact in terms of reducing crime. So let's look at this again from the statistical perspective. To be able to understand one particular approach or project or anything, any measure, whatever, policy, its impact on its success rate, how is it measured? How can you possibly measure in any area, let's say in the marketing area, and you're trying to understand how to focus your marketing efforts, advertising efforts, how to spend your advertising dollars in the most successful or the smartest manner, you apply these kinds of studies, statistical studies, and or to measure the outcome, the potential influence of your advertising efforts, and look at the numbers. And if the results are extremely poor, what do? What is a smart thing? You obviously have to change or stop what you're doing or improve what you're doing or change what you're doing, and at least come up with some kind of decision saying obviously what we're doing is not helping us. By the same token, the logic is the same. They're applying those toughest gun laws in those cities, in those metro areas, in those states, and then we're looking at the current crime rate, and those measures have been in place for years, and we're looking at the number of criminal activities with firearms. It's not even making any dent. Forget about it. The crime is increasing. Let's forget about helping any improvement. Any kind of slightest amount of improvement. It is zero improvement. In fact, it's getting worse. So what should tell you? If you're a believer of following the data, if you believe in the scientific approach, if you believe in rational thinking and rational reasoning, this very result should tell you that what they're doing is not coming up with any solutions. They're not coming up with any solutions. They're not resolving any problems. They cannot even prevent the problems from getting worse. Yet, they are more than ever resolved to continue doing the same and exact same thing and spread it through the entire nation. And I want to also here add something else in this picture, in this data. Out of those 20,000, remember I said 20,000 people because about 40% of those 50,000 people, getting killed with firearms, and the other 30,000 is out of the equation because they're all homicides. So, out of those 20,000 people who lost their lives during some kind of a criminal incident with firearms, overwhelming majority. Right now, I think the number is, it's overwhelming, is way over 90%. I would say close to 97. Challenge me, try to find that number percentage. Again, I'm just talking from my memory, but close to 97% lost their lives via what kind of firearm you think? You guess it right. Pistol or revolver. Handgun. Not a rifle. Not a rifle, handgun. That number, again, my percentage, I might be a little bit off, but this is what I'm trying to get. Out of total people who lost their lives, maybe the number of people got killed with rifles is, let's say, 10%, okay? 10%. The other 90% got killed via handguns. 10% lost their lives via rifles. Out of that 10%, and that including in that maybe if the few accidents, hunting accidents, that number is so little, so I'm going to call it negligible for this perspective. For the sake of analysis, for the sake of our discussion, I'm going to call it negligible. In the entire, all the rifles, that means all the long guns, let's call it long guns, right? All the shotguns and rifles, the percentage of AR-15 platforms are less than 3%. Less than 3%. And what the gun control lobby and those supporting that lobby, what kind of policies they're trying to come up with? They declare that AR-15 is an assault weapon, is very dangerous. It's gotta be eliminated. No one needs AR-15. We're gonna have to remove it, and we're gonna have to collect it, from people's houses. No one should have AR-15. Look at how drastic, how radical approach they have for what kind of percentage? 3% of all criminal incidents are committed, only 3% with AR-15s. Yes, I can hear those people saying that, many school shootings have been committed using AR-15s, but we're looking at the whole picture. We're not necessarily only talking about school shootings. We're talking about all kinds of shootings, and in the number that I gave you, close to 50,000 people, everything is involved in that. You remember, that is also school shootings is part of that number. Even with that inclusion, 3%. So for a gun type, which is AR-15, which makes only 3% of all the firearm-related criminal incidents, gun control lobby is putting all their efforts to eliminate it completely. Yet, 97% of people, or those 20,000 people that were killed, that lost their lives in 2021, lost their lives because of many other types of guns, and actually 90% of it are handguns. So now I'm bringing this question again from the data perspective, from the rational thinking perspective. What kind of a person, especially in a policy making positions, any person in a policy making position or any kind of advising position, any kind of analyst position, should have sufficient amount of education, training, intelligence, common sense to be able to look at these numbers and see that what they're doing is not resolving anything. What they're focusing on is futile, actually wasting taxpayers' money. Because what they're talking about, what they're trying to come up with, those new restrictions, are not going to make any dent at all. In fact, you remember the Brady law, which brought by Clinton administration after 10 years, they totally did away with that, and they abolished that officially by saying that it didn't do any kind of improvements. They did extensive, very overwhelming, very extensive analyses to see its impact, and they concluded that Brady Act, with all those provisions in it, did not have slightest amount of impact in terms of reducing the gun-related crime. So, how is it that, it looks like right now we're even far worse than that time when they look at that mindset, which actually look at the Brady law, its income, its outcome, and what kind of outcome, and influence it had on the gun-related crimes, and they made it, at least they were objective enough, rational enough to look at it and analyze it, and say, it wasn't resolving anything. And now they're far worse. Currently, the policymakers who are in the service of the gun control lobby is not even bringing those questions. It is appalling to see that those people, those individuals who are in the policy making position, and their advisors, and all those people that are working for them and supporting them with their analytical work, that is not being brought to daylight. It's almost like, friends, no one can be that dumb or stupid or blind. There's got to be some other kind of actually ill intent behind all that. All this gun control, there is, at the highest political levels in this country, there is a sick intent to restrict the guns to the law-abiding citizens, and their intent is to basically render the law-abiding citizens totally defenseless, absolutely 100% defenseless against the criminal elements who will never, ever, ever even consider for a second to give up on their guns. Like I said, that was the first portion of what I wanted to talk about. That was those 20,000 people out of total population, and I called approximately 50,000. It's actually 48 some thousand. And then wanted to kind of delve into the criminal aspect of it. And now the other aspect of it I want to talk about, which is the homicide part of it. About what close to 30,000 people, give and take, maybe 28,000 to 30,000. Let's make it round number so I can talk a little easy. 30,000 people lost their lives because they killed themselves. First off, it is an epidemic. It is a public health problem, extremely serious public health problem. It's at the epidemic level. 30,000 people in one nation taking their own lives. In the process, they're using firearms. Before even talking about guns, don't you think there is something else to be talked about, to bring to the table, which is the public health crisis, which is the public health epidemic, the social components of this problem, psychological components of this problem, so social psychological components of this problem. What are the reasons leading these people to take their own lives? What kind of changes happen if you compare these numbers maybe 30, 40 years ago, which wasn't that high? What possibly have changed in the society? They made these people now, push to the limit, to their limit, and they decide to take their own lives. So is this a gun problem, or is this some other kind of problem? And now, of course, I know the arguments, right? Somebody from the gun control lobby, gun control side, would come and say, well, yeah, that's a public health problem, that's a mental problem, but if we can prevent them from accessing guns, in other words, if this guy who wants to kill himself or herself, if he didn't have a gun, maybe he'd be alive today. If somebody, believe it or not, has the guts or decisiveness of holding that gun in his hand and pulling that trigger to take his own life, believe me, that person can find other means to take his own life or her life. This argument that gun makes it easier doesn't hold any water at all. Any water at all. That can be challenged from various different perspectives. So again, you cannot resolve a mental health problem of the nation by eliminating guns. And even if, let's say, you think that works, you do something and you restrict those people who otherwise would kill themselves, and they can't have an access. They don't have an access to guns. Let's say, take an example, one guy and he wants to kill himself, and now he can't have a gun, and therefore the thinking goes, he's not going to be able to kill himself, so he'll be still alive. First off, this person being alive, imagine the amount of pain and extreme pain that he's living on a day-to-day basis, because this guy, if he had a gun, would be pulling that trigger, and two, most likely, and absolutely I would say, he will find other means to take his own life, because he is 100% determined. There is no confusion, there is no hesitation in his mind. He will kill himself. And believe me, when there is a will, there is a way. He will find that way. He will take his own life. So the gun argument, in this sense, anti-gun argument in this sense, doesn't even make any sense at all. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on then? Again, why is it that when you put things on table and try to kind of brush them from the rational, analytical perspective, things in general, if you can try to summarize it like this, if it's making sense to you, if all these things that I said, if it's making sense to you, I'm asking you, then why is it that gun lobby is so incredibly hell-bent to prevent people from owning guns, which is guaranteed by the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Is there some other hidden agenda behind that, and they're actually they're serving that agenda in the long run? Would that be something else? I'm not going to talk about that and leave that up to you. And I'm going to stop my presentation right here. And I want to thank you for taking time and watch my video. Stay safe. Bye-bye.